Good morning, thank you. I'm Mandy Macdonald. I'm the strategic lead for Derby City Council for any case where a child is at risk of sexual exploitation or is actually sexually exploited. And I can tell you that last year, between 2013 and April this year, we dealt with 69 cases of young people who were at risk of child sexual exploitation. And within that number, there were 5 cases that were specific trafficking cases. So this is an issue that we're dealing with now, that we deal with locally, and we need to all be aware of it. As strategic lead, I chair the operational group of the Safeguarding Boards on behalf of the Safeguarding Board, which is a multi-agency team. It's made up of Safe and Sound, of the police, of health, of education. We have all agencies in Derby represented, but we do need one from the church. And anyone that wants to volunteer can speak to me today. And we work together to implement and develop the work around child sexual exploitation in the city. And what we need is a very strong correlation between child sexual exploitation and adult exploitation, which is why it's important that we're all here today to think about the strands and the threads between them. In terms of those cases that we've dealt with this year, we've had 2 cases of trafficking within the city. One case, a young woman, you've probably seen this in the local newspapers, was just dumped within the city and turned up at a local police station, and she didn't know where she'd been. All she knew was that she had probably been in 2 or 3 countries and then turned up in Derby. We've also had a young man who was found in a cannabis farm in the city, and then we've also had another case, a couple of cases, one where a young person was trafficked out of the country, and then that tied in with other issues, because there are parallels with other issues like forced marriage. And the vast majority of cases we deal with are those young people who have been trafficked within the UK. And those young people have been trafficked within our city and moved around. Now, no one's touched on it yet, but there is no minimum movement required for trafficking. So under Section 59A of the Sexual Offences Act, we're talking about if you traffic a person, the act of exploitation needs to take place during or at the end of a journey. But I could take one of you from this room to a room next door, and if I exploit you during the journey or at the end of the journey, you have been trafficked. So that's how, literal we need to think in terms of this issue. We heard about Operation Retriever, which is probably one of the largest trafficking cases in the country, and kicked off, I think, a political agenda around child sexual exploitation. We've also had Operation Kern, where the trafficking legislation wasn't used to the same effect, but there was an issue with trafficking within Operation Kern for young people. I think what Emlyn was referring to was adults who were also trafficked within that operation. And we are thinking of ways to improve and share information with all people in the city, so that's communities, professionals, everyone needs to be able to share information. And through the child sexual exploitation strategy, we use Operation Liberty, which is a file which is held centrally at the police unit, the central referral unit, and we have information report forms, and I will direct you to the Derby Safeguarding Board website to download these information report forms. They are for cases where you suspect a child has been sexually exploited in any format, and that trafficking being one of them. And that those forms are also useful for sharing information about persons who you believe may be harming a child in context to child sexual exploitation again. On that site, on the Derby Safeguarding Board website, there is also a risk assessment toolkit, and that's a practical guide on how to identify child sexual exploitation in its many formats, and then how to intervene and where to get support and help from. I haven't got a PowerPoint today. I'm a late entry to the event, and Helen won't be joining us today, unfortunately. She's unable to make it, which is one of the reasons I'm speaking. But I want to remind you that, where we cross over, where the cross-references for child trafficking and adult trafficking, traffickers, the people who commit that crime, may also have children. So they need to be dealt with within a child protection framework. So you need to think really broadly when you're thinking about trafficking and that crime. And within the Palermo Protocol, which Nicola put the definition up there for you, there are 3 criteria in that protocol, which is the the act, the means and the purpose. The act is how are they moved, transported. The means is how is that achieved? Is it through force or, is it through coercion? And then the purpose is for what purpose are they being moved? When we're talking about children, and specifically children, this doesn't relate to adults, you don't need the middle element, the means. You don't need to prove that a child's been coerced or is naive when they're being moved around. You just need the first two sections to identify and work with trafficking. And that's because they're children, they can't consent to their own abuse. And that's the message I want to leave you with. So please look at the Derby Safeguarding Board website.